Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Gameweek 16 transfer plans. We're looking at a game week here where, unfortunately, because I've made a free transfer in Gameweek 15, I don't think I can make super powerful moves this week. A lot of people will identify this game week as a week to sell Mbumo, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But for myself and my own personal team, I don't really think there's a need to sell him, just because if I don't sell him this game week and have two free transfers to sort of make use of, I guess, the funds between Mbumo and let's say someone in the midfield that I actually want from a budget position, or even for a single free transfer position, there's really no need to make a move at all. The way I see it, there are players like Enzo, Ahmad, and maybe even Iwobi, for example, who are quite interesting as a budget player to move into that we think can have a lot of permanence really within the game. For myself, I don't think that's necessarily the case. So when I look at myself and my own team, holding Mbumo probably makes sense because I'd rather just hold for the next fixture at home, which is Nottingham Forest at home, and then I can sell him after that. And that's sort of the general plan that I have coming out of Game Week 15 here with 73 points. That sends me to around 362,000 in the world. So I'm quite happy with the team as it is, bar the defense. But I still think that in the meantime, the only thing that I feel like I'm missing is potentially another Arsenal defender or someone like Trent. And otherwise, I think this game week, though, I have a very strong team, so I'm not too worried about that. As far as reflecting on Game Week 15 itself, the Palmer captaincy worked out really nicely in our favor. It just shows you, of course, how ridiculous the game is at times in terms of the swings when you can see Saka getting a vice captain and then Palmer getting a captaincy. As far as, let's say, someone like Mbumo, yes, of course, he's had 4 to 5 game weeks straight of poor data. But I have to go back and say that we've got more historical data on players. The idea that someone is going to be completely cold for the rest of the season because of 4 to 5 game weeks of data is not great. Although it does give us a reflection of how they've performed recently, it doesn't necessarily correlate to, say, how they perform or will perform in the future. A good example of this is, I mean, a lot of the signal in terms of Haaland, for example, having great XG performances, but people not buying him, right, or looking him as a buy. And I think the same applies to Mbumo, where when you're forecasting ahead and you're looking at, let's say, a penalty taker, they can still come good as long as they've got a good bed of historical underlyings that you think, they can return to and reach that sort of level. So happy with Mbumo's performance. Not saying that he's an amazing player. This is clearly his worst season when it comes to underlying data. So there's probably a good reason to sell him in the future, and I still plan on selling him. Just talking about the idea that I don't think he was a guaranteed sell necessarily. Now, in terms of other players who've been pretty disappointing lately, we know Cunha has been quite disappointing. I think one thing with him is that he's clearly playing for a much more inferior team. He's probably on penalties, which is nice. But I think that sort of inferior team strength in terms of attack is there. And his underlyings this season have been running very hot compared to historical seasons. And so it does make sense, I think, for him to eventually be a sell when his and his team's fixtures get much worse beyond, let's say, Game Week 18. As far as João Pedro and Isak, not really too worried about them. I think João Pedro was always expected to have poor minutes, but by moving into João Pedro, I gave myself the ability to move into Isak or even Trent in the previous game week, and I did choose to go for Trent because of the uncertainty around the Liverpool game and that suspension there. That sort of finalized my move. For Guardiola, it does seem like that the Ake injury is a pretty big dampener because it does sort of make him play center back for a bit, and I think that's a huge negative impact. With Flecken, I think he's always going to be a luxury transfer where whenever I have the ability to, repurpose my team. Let's say maybe I go out of Mbumo in a few weeks' time. Potentially later down the line, I could even move out of Isak. But when I sort of strip funds out of my team in different positions, and suddenly I've got cash lying around, and I don't have any priority players outside of, let's say, my goalkeeper to deal with, then I will find the time to sort of move the funds potentially into an Allison later down the line, which I think makes a lot of sense, considering we know that they've almost got a double guaranteed later down the line. Depending on how late I wildcard, that could actually impact how I view a Flecken to Raya versus a Flecken to Allison, something like that. So those are my thoughts right now. In terms of setting up my team for next game week here in Game Week 16, I'm planning to play Hall, Gabriel, and Guardiola. Gabriel was not seen in training, and I'm recording this video after the Tuesday games in the Champions League, so Liverpool have just won as well. So Real Madrid, which is nice, finally. But yeah, I mean, more crucially, I think I'm actually planning to Palmer captain, and I'm vice captaining Salah, just because I really think that, once again, I'm going to go off the team strengths here, and I do think that Palmer has made a huge stride in terms of being able to be honestly close to, I would say, maybe even better than being just outright better than Haaland as an asset within the game right now, and then close to Salah. And ultimately, the team gap between, let's say, Brentford at home versus Fulham at home in terms of quality of defense that Palmer and Salah is facing makes me still want to go for the Palmer captaincy once again. And I'm happy to go against that Salah captaincy, although it's not worked out previously before. With Hall, I think just a great game with Leicester at home. Guardiola, as I said, central center back isn't great, but I don't think United have been exquisite on offense, so I'm not too worried about that. It's still, a worse fixture compared to what Liverpool have, or even let's say what another Arsenal defender would bring to the table for me. But I still don't think it's necessarily worth the transfer this week, so I'm planning to keep Guardiola as things stand. And then I'm going to give Cunha, João Pedro, Isak all these great home fixtures. There's no real concerns there. And then Rodgers and Dunk will sit on my bench. I think because Brighton have been so equally disappointing to City and potentially be a worse defense this season, I have no real qualms with the idea of just benching Dunk once again. He's been my auto sub for the last 2 weeks, and he's been extremely, extremely disappointing. But that's basically it for my team in terms of Gameweek 16. I don't really plan on making a move, but I have thought about the idea of maybe binning out Lewis because of the suspension and the ability to maybe, deal with, let's say, a potential Lewis price fall by moving into Colwill, who I think is actually just going to be an amazing pick. Because when we ultimately go back to, let's say, these Chelsea fixtures, the idea of going to Colwill this week is probably, better auto sub if, let's say, Gabriel's out, and having someone that has amazing fixtures really for the next 8 game weeks in a row, really. And honestly, I mean, you can hold the Chelsea players so easily up until game week 29, especially if you can rotate someone like Colwill. So those are my thoughts on Colwill, and I think he's a very, very strong pick in the game, probably the strongest 4.5, stronger than Hull in my opinion, but Hull in the intermediate still has a better fixture for me, so I'm pretty happy to own Hull for this game week specifically. All right, so we're back here with the Fantasy Football Hub client. This is the My Team pick and rating tool, one of the tools that I use always for my transfer plans. If you're interested in playing around with the tool yourself, getting the AI to suggest transfers along your transfer path and along your planning, have a look at the link in the description below. I believe there's a free trial offer still in place, and there's also going to be some Christmas deals too. So depending on the time you click on this video, I'm sure you'll find some new offerings in Fantasy Football Hub. But in general, of course, as I said, all the tools that they actually provide are very, very good tools for people who want to climb up the rank and actually move up in their mini leagues. Now, in Gameweek 16, I'm with the team here that I think I'm happy with. I'm planning to roll unless there's something wrong with Gabriel. Clearly, we need to wait for Arteta to give us news on that. It's very unlikely that he will, but I will say that he was quite candid with the Odegaard injury when it was long term. If this Gabriel injury is quite severe and maybe the development of it isn't great, I hope that Arteta gives us some news on that. We also have the Champions League game. He'll be in the squad no matter what, or he won't, and that will give us more information. And so we'll have ultimately the pre-presser, the post-presser, and also the pre-presser for the Premier League games around Arsenal. So that will hopefully give us some clues. What I would say is if Gabriel's out for a long time, I think I'm just going to do a like-for-like transfer from Gabriel to another Arsenal defender. I won't necessarily go towards Saliba. I think it's actually perfectly fine to simply just go towards Timber. Timber did miss training, but I still think that he's going to be prioritized for the key games, which are still the Premier League games. And hopefully I can sort of pocket some money back. If I really do feel like Saliba is the more robust move, I'll go there, but I think there's no need to sort of just go for Saliba. I'm not going to react to, for example, some of the recent hauls. I still think Timber's a very, very good pick. And as long as I think his minutes are good, I still think he's a safe option. As far as Game Week 17, I think this is also another game week to roll. We talked about how Mbeumo actually has a great home fixture here. It's still Nottingham Forest. A lot of people still see them as a great defense, and they are, but it's still Mbeumo at home. Brentford have actually been a very solid attack. I don't really mind keeping him for this game. Even Cunha, for example, has Leicester away. Leicester have actually looked quite good recently. I don't think necessarily when it comes to defense that they've been super stellar, but Brighton actually were pretty quiet in the previous away match, and hopefully Cunha can do a little bit better. But I also think he's not a necessary transfer, right? Some people can actually look towards selling Cunha in Game Week 17, but I don't think that's necessarily something that you have to do, as I said. So it all comes down to whether I want to move out of Guardiola sooner than later. I think this is the one bad game for Guardiola when it comes to his overall run. Yes, it's all Ake dependent. It's all dependent on whether he plays central center back or a much more advanced position within the team. But the Aston Villa game is always going to be the bad game, and it always would have been regardless of the position that Guardiola plays. Whereas actually keeping Guardiola post Game Week 17, if he's fit and available for all the games between 18, 19, 20, I think he's actually still a really, really good pick within the game because you've got really good clean sheet odds, I think, for 18, 19. And honestly, all the opponents are quite easy to attack in terms of 19 and 20. So hopefully Guardiola can play some form of an advanced role as the weeks go along and as some players come back. Ake, unfortunately, the news is that he's out for weeks, which was confirmed by Pep in his presser today. So it's more a case of if players like Akanji and Stones can come back into the side, allowing him to play a little bit more of an advanced role, which kind of nets us a bit of a positive. Also, I mean, ultimately, more players coming back that aren't actually as terrible as Walker would hopefully help with the clean sheet odds. Now, as far as, let's say, some of the other players in the team, I mean, Isak is a great fixture when it comes to Game Week 16. So quickly moving now towards Game Week 18, my plan is to roll actually in Game Week 17. So I think that's something that's crucial. There is an option where if I really don't like Cunha for whatever reason, I could sell Cunha towards Raul and pocket a Southampton home fixture. I think that's plausible, but actually I don't think I'll do that. I think I'll wait till Game Week 18 to make some moves. And the move that I'd actually like to make is to actually go back into Solanke as he actually has an okay game here compared to, let's say, Cunha. I still think he's actually an extremely high quality pick within the game. And I am also planning to move out of someone like Mbeumo here as well. So that's one of the options. Moving, let's say, Mbeumo to Eze and then moving into Solanke. I don't think Solanke is going to rise because I don't think a lot of people are that interested in Solanke. So I doubt he's going to rise. With Mbeumo, the issue is that if I take 2 more falls in the near to distant future, I probably won't be able to get towards Eze. So this is a very, very tight move as of right now. It's a 0.0 move, but that's actually one of the options that I have. And by locking this move into place, I can then go towards Game Week 19 and then actually have quite a strong structure, but probably a little bit of a weaker defense compared to most people. But on Game Week 19, I think it's not a bad week to, for example, consider a transfer like, for example, moving Lewis out to Colwill, hopefully a move that I can still make as of right now. So that's sort of the rough plan that I have in the future where I can move Colwill into the team and I still have rotation between players like Hull and Dunk who are still usable. And that's going to be the team. This is one of the transfer options that I have. The alternative transfer option, if I just reload the pick tool, is to actually roll once again Game Week 16, roll again Game Week 17, and then actually, if nothing happens to Lewis's price point, which could be possible, right? He should be price locked from 16 onwards. If he doesn't get a price fall this game week somehow, and he escapes from it, I could actually get away with something like Trent in the future coming in for Lewis if Trent also doesn't rise, which I gather is a little bit improbable. At the same time, though, when we look at Trent's fixtures, I don't see people necessarily buying him ahead of Spurs away. So if someone like Trent, for example, doesn't get a price rise before the Fulham at home game because he's already got a 1 price rise in the previous week, and if he, let's say, probably misses out on the clean sheet in Game Week 16 or whatever happens that makes people not so interested in buying Trent after Game Week 16, if I can get towards something like maybe moving Cunha to Stewart here, just a generic 4.4 player within the game, then that is actually quite interesting because I have money in the bank to do that. I gather once again that it's pretty improbable that I'll be allowed to get away with this. So I think that all these Game Week 18 moves are very, very specific to price rises happening in my direction. And that's it. So that's the transfer that I can make. And then obviously in Game Week 19, we can sort of address the team going forwards with future moves, and I'll have Trent, and I'll probably be fielding quite a tight structure here within this sort of price bracket. If I can't afford these moves 2 weeks down the line, I think what I will be doing instead in Game Week 18 is probably a move where I'll be moving out of Mbeumo first of all. Sorry, not in Game Week 18 actually, but I'll probably roll again in Game Week 18 and I'll move Mbeumo to Eze here. I'll probably move into Solanke as well, given that this is a pretty poor Cunha fixture. I get the reverse here. Move into Eze and Solanke, but then also probably downgrade someone like, for example, Lewis to Colwill. That will give me a bit of a buffer if I make the same moves that I wanted a little bit later. And hopefully that 0.1 buffer is enough, because I still, once again, can't see Lewis dropping for more than 0.1 for me. So this is definitely plausible. Another option that I can do is just simply moving Lewis to Colwill ahead of time. That gives me the pocketed money in the bank anyway. So I could have done Lewis to Colwill potentially on Game Week 16 so that this move is still, a reality when it comes to Game Week 19. And that's something that's been quite interesting as well. But generally speaking, I think the idea is to continue to monitor Trent, Solanke as players that I probably want to go into in the future, moving out of players like Cunha and Guardiola. And then Eze, I think, as a future transfer for Mbeumo is interesting. At the same time, ultimately, look, if someone like Enzo continues to play extremely well, all these moves will be facilitated by someone like Enzo, right? I instead of, let's say, even going to Colwill, I can maybe even keep someone like Rico Lewis, and I can actually instead go into someone like Trent. That's something that I will keep in the back pocket. Amad Diallo is also interesting as well. So these are the types of players that I think, if I can't get towards an Eze realistically, while still, moving into players like Solanke that I really, really like, then that's something that I'm considering later down the line. So those are my transfer plans for this game week. A little bit of a brief one because I do think that ultimately a lot of the moves in the future can be quite conditional. The options that I want to move into are definitely, as I said, players like Solanke and Trent. At the same time, I do want to be considering, how bad is Guardiola really over this run? How bad is the City defense continuing to look like? How good are the injuries in terms of, recovery time and what that means for Guardiola's minutes anyways? And then continuing to monitor some of the budget options that can replace Mbeumo, keeping in mind that I think Eze is the player that I like the most. And then also thinking about options moving out of Cunha. Is it just simply moving to a 4.5, moving to an extremely sort of tight structure, or moving back into someone like Solanke, who I quite like, particularly onboarding him back on Gameweek 19. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon in the next video.